Hi, everyone. It's such an honor and a pleasure to be here this morning for me from Arizona, and I guess this afternoon or evening for many of you in other parts of the world. I wanted to give a particular thank you to Jamie and Séverine for the invitation. It has been really wonderful to hear about the project that you all are involved in. I think if there's anything that I've become more and more convinced of in these last several years of working on Feral Atlas and then talking about it with groups of people after it was released, it's that we need to spend more time talking about and rethinking how we design our built environments. So I applaud you for doing that work, and I'm so glad to here with Lili to have the chance to be a small part of that. Let's see. So Lili, if you don't mind. Oh no, I've got a couple more things to say. I will give a few words of introduction of the Feral Atlas project. I have just a few slides, and then I'll turn it over to Lili for the majority of the talk, and then I'll speak a little bit at the end. Feral Atlas, many of you may know, is a digital environmental humanities project. It's also, it was released in late 2020, early 2021, and in the last year or so, we have also been working on putting together a print book that sort of further develops some of the theory that comes out of the project that should hopefully be available in early next year. Lili, would you mind advancing the slide, please?
Yes.
Thank you. So just to describe a little bit, I don't want to assume that everybody is familiar with the project. I wanted to show a little bit of what Feral Atlas is. This is a screenshot of the landing page of the project. As I said, it's a digital environmental humanities project. And I think, Lili, if you click, there are a few things that are animated, but they won't come up on their own, unfortunately. It's designed to be interactive. You'll see a little bit of that today, but I wanted to mention it from the outset because it's put together in a way where we intended some of the categories of analysis that Lili and I will talk about to also be built into the way that a user navigates the interface. So if you are intrigued by that, please spend some time with it after the talk. It's multimedia, so although it is built around a set of text entries, we really pushed to make sure that each of those entries would have a visual or auditory or video component so that it would be also a sort of immersive and experiential experience for the person using it. Go ahead and click again. Yes, it's grounded in the environmental humanities, although we have contributors from across the natural and the social sciences. And click the next one. It's open access. It was published by Stanford University Press. And I think those are the critical things. Yes, it consists of about 79 field reports and around 40 framing essays written by a large and diverse group of people. Okay, we can advance to the next slide. Thanks. Just to acknowledge the people who were involved in making it, the leader of the Feral Atlas team is Anna Singh, Jennifer Deeger, and Feifei Zhu and I were also part of the editorial team, and we had the pleasure and privilege of working with Lili as our map director. It was funded primarily by Aarhus University and the Danish Research Council, and came out of the program Aarhus University Research on the Anthropocene or AURA. And we also had around 100 other people contributing to making the project, including some of the people named below who played key roles in designing and building Feral Atlas. We can move to the next slide. And just in a nutshell, a one-sentence overview is that the project, it tells the story of what we call feral entities, which we define as beings both living and non-living, which acting in relationship to human-built infrastructures develop behaviors that exceed human design or control. So the project is really focused on thinking about how all of these built and designed interventions that humans make potentiate other kinds of organisms, sometimes living organisms or sometimes entities that aren't what we would define as alive, but that still have lively characteristics and qualities. And our argument is that that kind of potentiation between the ways that humans intervene in landscapes and then the organisms in those landscapes react and respond is effectively what makes the Anthropocene. You can see a few examples of the kinds of organisms we talk about arrayed there below, but I think Lili will go on to talk about them further, so I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Alder, and hello, everyone. So I'm going to talk a little bit in depth about some of the details of the atlas and kind of present a guide through it. So as Alder mentioned, at the heart of the atlas are 79 field reports, which each describe the ecological worlds created when non-humans get tangled up in human-made imperial and industrial infrastructures. And to follow the more than human dynamics described in each of these 79 reports, the Feral Atlas editors were really insistent that spatial and temporal analysis are essential. And so the design of the Feral Atlas site as a whole, as well as its individual design materials, attempt to attune a reader to these dynamics in mostly two different ways. Yeah. I don't know why I can't advance. There we go. So the first of these ways is through a kind of conceptual notion of what the editorial team called tippers. Feral Atlas tippers can be thought of as poems, which express the relentless spatial and material changes infrastructures make to land, air, and water. These infrastructures do work. Their gestures are repetitive, rhythmic, and ongoing. And so tippers attempt to attune a reader to the movements and sounds of infrastructures. They're burning, crowding, taking, piping, dumping, gridding, and smoothing. Non-humans might enter into coordination with the rhythms of these infrastructural actions and their landscape remakings, and in doing change local ecologies and allow certain non-humans to proliferate. Or a radical discordance with these gestures might lead to the violent obliteration of other non-human or more than human relationships and life worlds. So in describing and attuning to these gestures in time through the medium of video, these also contain sounds. And for us, sounds are as important as image. You can hear the sounds that accompany these videos on the Feral Atlas site. Not very good to broadcast through Zoom. The second way Feral Atlas attempts to orient the reader to the kinds of more than human dynamics described in each field report is through what we call a flow map. For Feral Atlas, a map is not merely a top-down cartographic view that positions events and things in global space, just as Anna and David spoke to as well. Instead, Feral Atlas's maps attempt to express dynamic relationships, which are the key more than human spatial and temporal relationships that inform the story being told in each of the reports. This is a flow map for the field report for Critchid fungus, which describes how global trade in frogs has led to catastrophic amphibian declines by spreading the amphibian disease Critchid fungus. Our flow map for this is a really simple one. It animates a diagram of Critchid fungus spread between 2004 and 2008 through the populations of mountain yellow-legged frogs in Stick Sea Lakes Basin in the Sierra Nevada Mountains in California. So this is a map of localized population decimation through disease spread, but it also indexes the period and place of research in which the spread was observed. Other temporal rhythms in the story of the spread of this fungus become apparent in watching and listening to the field reports accompanying Tipper, so the sound and video poem. Here, the infrastructural action of taking, in this case frogs, from one continent to another, is intensified by these spatialities and rhythms of global logistics. The sheer volume and persistence with which non-humans are transported across the globe intensify the possibility of disease spread. So between Tipper and map, we attempt to show that global rhythms are inextricably entangled with local dynamics. And between the global movement of people and things, humans and non-humans, and projects of colonization, empire, and capital, taking alters local dynamics differently. This is another map which speaks to the dynamics of take. This map introduces the field report for rats, written by author Leslie Stern, who introduces her report with a deeply personal account of the harm invasive rats have inflicted across non-humans and more than human relations in her New Zealand garden at the time of her writing in 2019. Ships visiting New Zealand in the late 18th and 19th centuries brought increased numbers of hitchhiking non-native rat species to New Zealand's shores. Their life rhythms out of sync with the dynamics of local flora and fauna, these rats proliferated across the islands, ripping through formerly stable ecologies in the process. This map, and we call this a map, shows one of the species pushed to extinction by feral rats. On the left is a skull of the now extinct bird species South Island snipe, and this skull is held in the collection at the Museum of New Zealand. On the right is a photograph of the last known individual of this species, taken by a conservationist in 1964, when the New Zealand Wildlife Service attempted to rescue the snipe by transferring individuals to a rat-free island. Two of these birds were caught on August 30th, 1964, and placed in an aviary. However, they were difficult to care for because of their need for a continuous supply of live food, and both died on September 1st. And since then, there have been no acceptable records of the species. So through this map, we attempt to express the sense of loss and mourning for an individual, in this case, a bird, and the story of the man who took this picture. But this is also a loss of entire ways of life. And all that remains is an artifact of natural history on the one hand, and the stories that continue to be told on another. This is a sound and video poem for another tipper, dump. The infrastructural rhythms of dump are quite different to those of take. Here, in a kind of very different rhythm, you see piles of plastic sheeting blow and drift gently in the breeze. A serene yet insidious scene where the violence of leaking toxins and choking materiality that this pile portends is beyond our immediate perception. Dumping brings forth the out-of-control effects of styrofoam. And this field report on styrofoam is not a scholarly essay, but a poem by poet Evelyn Riley. And I encourage you to go onto the Feral Atlas site to read the poem in its entirety. It gets to the point that styrofoam as an entity defies human timeframes absolutely. It might as well persist for eternity. And our map, which we made in an attempt to express and kind of speak to styrofoam's eternal stability, is a diagram of its molecular structure, endlessly repeating as it extends beyond the top and bottom of the screen. Another flow map that, again, speaks to a report that comes out of the dynamics of dump is a report that introduces the field report on Fukushima wood chips. And this map introduces a report which tells of how radioactive waste material from contaminated lands around the Fukushima nuclear power plant following the 2011 accident have since been incorporated into public works projects across Japan. The flow map to accompany this report, so this image, shows a selection of autoradiographs by the artist Takashi Morozumi, who placed photographic film over the surface of everyday objects found strewn about in the Fukushima prefecture. Decaying cesium particles clinging to the surface of these objects emit radiation, which interacted with the film, producing the glowing effect. And the point for me that this flow map raises is that more than human temporalities and timescales can be so radically different to, for instance, my own rhythms in relationship with time. So for instance, the half-life of cesium is around 30 years, which is the time it takes for only 1/2 of it to decay, while a particle of beta radiation, so the radiation it emits in the decay, is emitted in an instant. But an accumulated exposure to radiation over a prolonged period of time will make me sick. So perhaps it's a question of how we might attune to temporalities and timescales that are so radically different to our own, or at least be attentive to them in all their kind of difference and contingencies. And the field report that accompanies this map speaks to thresholds of contamination and exposure, detectability and accounting and harm. So thresholds which are contingent on timing and scale, as much as local social and ecological dynamics, materialities, institutional decisions, individual bodies and practices. Another tipper, this is the tipper for crowd, and like dump, the infrastructural rhythms of crowding also provoke different effects at different scales. In this case, material concentration tips from one state to another, from solid to solution, as it is dissolved by the flow of acid mine tailings. And this feeling of tipping from one state to another as a consequence of relentless infrastructural conditions in coordination with the conditions of environment and the dynamics of non-human activity is something we wanted to express in the following map. This is the map we made to accompany the field reports for coronavirus that we made in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. So during a time when Feral Atlas was being finalized for submission to the editors, the publishers. Unlike the other entries in the atlas, this map introduces not one, but 4 very different field reports, accounts of coronavirus that were written almost in the moment, in the midst of their unfolding. So we therefore wanted a map that would express a sense that coronavirus stories were still emerging, as well as a sense of pattern in the infrastructural environments that promoted conditions of crowding and provoked spread of the virus. This map shows coronavirus cluster events from February 7th to June 27th, 2020, which is the date this map was finalized. And the events popping up on the map were compiled from multiple reports by local, national, and international news outlets over a period of about 20 weeks. And the timing of the animation kind of corresponds to the pace of these news items' appearance. So this map also indexes the period in which it was made. You probably get a sense by now, hopefully, that each of Feral Atlas's flow maps are quite different. I encourage you to go onto the site and kind of click through the various reports, and you'll really get a sense of the sort of wealth of media and ways of making that each map kind of speaks to. This was intentional. We wanted each map to kind of speak to and show the wildly different perspectives that the authors were coming from, and also the other atlas contributors, and also to kind of speak to the wildly different spatial and temporal scales. The atlas was designed in a way that I think Alder will speak to this a little later, but the atlas was designed so that it could be navigated through freely and open-endedly, so that each of these different maps would accumulate kind of map by map, allowing a gradual orientation within the endless complexity of the Anthropocene that Feral Atlas was built to describe. The last flow map I want to show you runs time in reverse, speaking to the dynamics of disappearance rather than emergence. This map introduces the field report for bee villains, in which the author describes how the ecological simplification in the expanding agro-industrial plantations of Anomalia, the fruit-producing capital of Colombia, drives native bee species decline. The diversity of sizes, shapes, and colors of bee species photographed by the author of this map speaks to the many ways in which these bees relate with the vast diversity of flowering plant species blooming there. In her report, the author describes witnessing the order of species decline over the course of her fieldwork, hand in hand with expanding agro-industry. Many, mostly solitary bees, disappeared before they were even identified at the species level. They survive only in memory through their names, which in time also fade. Only 2 species survive and flourish. So I want to end there. Actually, no, I don't want to end there. I just have one more thing to show before I pass over to Alder. And we were speaking about this when we were preparing this talk, how through many of these maps contain sounds, as do the tippers. And for me, as I was thinking about the title of this program and the kind of attunement and focus on how to map time as well as space, for me, sound is really important. So thinking about Rachel Carson describing the silence of early mornings, no longer filled with birdsong in silent spring, to the total silence inside, other than the kind of hum of machinery inside the Dutch agricultural greenhouses down the road from where I live, to the recorded soundscapes of beneath a forest canopy or kind of beneath the ground. I almost get a sense that sound might offer more possibility for describing more intuitively complex and overlapping more than human relations in time and space and the visual. But this is just a hunch, and I'll now pass it over to Alder.
Thanks, Lili. the question of multi-species sonic experiences, and I think also the visuals of the the hydroponic factory environment that you just showed. We wanted to use that as a sort of transition point to zoom out and think about some of the other ways that time is treated in Feral Atlas. And I think these are evidenced in the flow maps that Lili showed, but there are also maybe sort of bigger picture questions and concepts. So I have 2 points that I'll try to make succinctly, and just a couple of closing comments, and then we can move into the discussion. Something that animates the Feral Atlas project broadly, and which Anat Singh has written about in her other work, is the importance of looking at multi-species coordinations. So understanding other species, not just in terms of what they do on their own right, but how they interact with each other and how that interaction potentiates new forms of emergence from these multi-species assemblages in which humans may also play a part. One of the arguments that we tried to put forward in Feral Atlas and that we've developed a little bit more recently is to really think about non-humans as historical actors, not just as sort of inert objects that exist alongside human plans and come along with them at our behest, but rather as actors that create history in their own right. Anna has written about that, particularly with respect to matsutake mushrooms, and more recently she's written about it in terms of virulent noxious fungus. But one of the other examples that has been a real touchstone for us is water hyacinth, which has a really interesting history. It comes so here we have a connection with the Atlas de Champs, but it comes originally out of Amazonia and was taken by explorers to be a part of botanical gardens. But it turns out that it spills over and invades calm water quite easily and rampantly. And that, in combination with the infrastructural interventions of colonial engineers who put systems in place to try to slow rivers or channel them, make them more manageable, turned out to create environments all over the world that have potentiated the growth and overgrowth of water hyacinth to an extent that it's almost ineradicable in many places. So this to me is a really vivid example of how those concrete aspects of infrastructural engineering can then potentiate multi-species change in an environment without any additional human intervention or direction. The plant did what it was able to do and did it quite well in the new places that it was able to expand to. So this is one way we might think about time. Another way that we thought about time in Feral Atlas was particularly in thinking about the patterning of history. There are, in the project, one of our organizational sort of tools is the relationship of each of the 79 feral entities or case studies to one of 4 detonator landscapes. And we use these as ways of thinking about historical processes that are mirrored, that reverberate across space and time. The 4 landscapes that we used are invasion, a landscape of invasion starting in 1492 with Euro-American contact, empire associated to the processes of empire building primarily by European nations, capital associated to the processes of capital accumulation in the Industrial Revolution, and then acceleration, which loosely periodized looks at this 20th century period when everything seems to be speeding up and accumulating and piling on at a breakneck speed. We think about these as sort of founding conjunctures that have world-making effects. So sometimes we refer to these detonator landscapes as detonator worlds. And the idea of detonation is meant to refer to the sort of booming effect that comes out of this conjunctural moment that leads to change that that has these follow-on reverberations across spaces and times. So I'll show you one of these landscapes. Lili, if you wouldn't mind advancing to the next slide. This is the landscape for empire, and I'm aware that it will be quite fuzzy on your screens. This is just a screenshot from the digital project. These landscapes, were we to print them out, would be sort of the size of a mural. So unfortunately, they're quite difficult to show on a PowerPoint. But if you look at this landscape, this is, as I said, the landscape for empire, and you'll see that rather than showing a single specific and recognizable geographic space or a particular localized moment in time, what it does is it takes processes that took place under colonial empires in different places across the world and juxtaposes them into this sort of imagined and fantastical image of a landscape. So you'll see down in the bottom right corner, a soldier guarding poppies. In the bottom left, there's a teak plantation. Up towards the middle, you see a large-scale dam, and off to the left of that, I think there are some water lilies there, but there are also the I'm forgetting the name, Victoria Amazonica, the large lily pads that come out of the Amazon and that were taken around the world to botanical gardens as part of the colonial project. And then farther down the landscape, you'll see an image of, this is a historical image that Faye, who created the landscapes, juxtaposed. This is an image of a slave ship taking people from a port across the ocean. And here in the middle, also a container ship coming the opposite direction. There's a lot to see here, so I won't try to describe it all, but I think the brief overview hopefully gives you a sense of the way that we were thinking about these processes, these founding conjunctures, as being in relationship to each other, but proceeding in patterns that perhaps don't take place all at the same time with simultaneity, but rather sort of resound across different places at different moments in history. So the place for us to land, I think, to zoom way out, is to think about just sort of the question of what does it mean that we are now in this moment that is being referred to as the Anthropocene. And I'm sure all of you are aware that there's been a lot of back and forth debate about the term Anthropocene, both within the community of geologists, who are the ones who are trying to decide whether or not to adopt the term. Last I heard, it was leaning favorably that direction, and there was some paperwork yet to be done. But I think you probably have all seen these reports have come out in the media lately that they're in the process of looking for particular sites to sort of commemorate or mark in a way that is publicly accessible the changes in the time period of the Anthropocene. But within the social sciences, there's been also a lot of debate about whether or not that term is useful at all. And there are some quite valid critiques of it. I think there's a way that Anthropocene can be taken as a term that that really lionizes humanity, that sort of puts the focus on humans, and we can sort of think of it as what's come about after all of this technological advancement that has happened in the last 200 to 500 years. And then there's also part of that debate. So critical social scientists, I should say, feel quite concerned about that possibility, that the idea of the Anthropocene could become a celebratory thing as opposed to an indicator of environmental harm and a need to change the way that we interact with the world around us. So Feral Atlas responds to that second concern. But there's also another concern that has been raised in the social sciences and the humanities, which is that the geological timescales that we talk about when we talk about the Anthropocene, at least in terms of stratigraphy, they are so vast that it is very difficult to think about how social science could intervene, how the humanities could intervene, because these scopes and scales, they outpace human history by a measure that's almost hard to fathom. And I think our our answer to that in terms of thinking about time has been, that may be true, but it's true when we think about a planetary scope and scale. There are also ways to think about the Anthropocene that are not just planetary, but that are very particular and that start from looking at the place where you are, which we refer to as a patch, and really trying to get a sense of who else is there with you. And by who, I mean not just humans, but also more than humans, whether they're living or non-living beings. Also other groups of people who may not belong to the same social grouping that you come from. And then starting with that careful and close observation and thinking about the processes that link your particular patch to other places and other times, thinking about the things that are commonalities that that link you to this larger process of the Anthropocene. And our argument is that this is a way that those of us who are interested in a sort of renewed natural history or in participating in these questions about what should the future look like, how can we work our way to a better future that doesn't rely on and perpetuate human domination, and at that the domination of a particular reduced privileged set of humans over Earth's processes. How can we participate in those conversations? So thinking with the patch is sort of our way forward in that direction. And some of that, if you are interested in it, is I think more eloquently outlined in the book that will come out early next year. Let's see, I think that's the last thing I wanted to say, with the exception, Lili, you're welcome to advance to the last slide if you don't mind. But I did, I had a note to myself at the beginning to thank our co-presenters from the Atlas de Champs, not only for the beautiful project that they've presented. I see so much productive overlap and conversation between these two, but also I really appreciate your invocation at the beginning to, even though we're in this digital medium that is so dematerialized, to think about that digital experience from the place of connecting to where we're sitting. So thank you for that, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.